I'm Kelsey Kennedy. I work here at Cook County Higher Education in Grand Marais. My job is to provide education in our community, so people don't have to drive to the Twin Cities or Duluth if they don't want to for things. And we're really excited these days to bring things into your home or office or wherever you are with Zoom. And this is one of those ones that we would never be able to do without the option of Zoom. So we are excited for that. With that being said, there is closed captioning. If you'd like it at all, you're welcome to turn that on. I'm also recommending that you go to the view button and select the option that best fits how you'd like to view the session today as a collective or potentially just the speaker. That is kind of up to you. I was part of the group that chose this book. I had been looking for materials or a book that would be a really good fit for us as we do a community read here in Cook County for the last 2 years. And as I was looking over books and topics, I came upon something that was talking about the University of Minnesota Press that was working on this book. And I just thought it was so perfect. There's so many people in our community that have connections to Scandinavia, Finland. They're part of some Norwegian language group or whatever the piece is that have them interested in their history or their connections to craft like we have North House here in town. Thought this book might bring some people to our community conversation in a different way. Again, as it's just saying, as some of you may know, we've been doing community read for over 2 years to encourage our community and beyond to learn today and have conversations that might not have on topics of importance. When picking this book, I just became very aware that I'm more unfamiliar with the history of Sámi and Scandinavia than I would think. And I just realized that I don't have a lot of that foundations that many of you attending may have based on family connections. As we talk today, I wanted to reference that Sápmi is the name for the cultural region traditionally inhabited by the Sami people and is located in Northern Europe. It stretches across 4 countries, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. The book, The Rocks Will Echo Our Sorrow, The Forced Displacement of the Northern Sami, by author Elin Anna Labba, was translated into English by Fiona Graham through University of Minnesota Press, shares a profound and personal story through history, poetry, and images. Labba's remarkable blend of historical reportage, of memoir, lyrical reimagining takes you to the lost homeland of her ancestors in northern Norway and Sweden, unraveling the forced displacement of the indigenous Sami in the early 20th century. Through those stories and photographs, letters, we are just really taken along on the gathered chorus of the Sami expressions that resonated across the years. The book depicts a hard life, reindeer loss when they turn north towards the former lands, children left with relatives, and then stay behind the immense hardships endured by those compelled to abandon their nomadic lifestyle or modify those things. A chorus of voices emerge from those who can no longer tell their stories and that portraying the grief that is silenced but still carried on. Elin, we are so grateful to have you today. Elin Anna Labba, a Sami author and journalist born in Kiruna, Sweden. I'm hoping I'm saying that. If not,
Kiruna.
Debuted her book in 2020. The title at that time was "The Gentleman Put Us Here," about the forced relocations in Sweden, which I'll be curious to hear more about the change in the title if we'll talk about that in a little bit. The book explores the forced migration, as we talked about, and it has got you many prestigious awards, and we are excited about having you here. It was such a great connection to be talking with Minnesota Press and having them say they had the opportunity to have you speak with us. Not only did we have the book that I was excited about, but also the opportunity to be with you today. With that being said, could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself? Fill in the blanks maybe I haven't started asking questions on yet.
Yeah, very nice to be here. I'm very glad. I'm not used to doing this in English, but I try. This is my first talk actually in English. As I speak Swedish, that's my first language, and Northern Sami. And the book was published in Sweden in this is the Swedish the Sami book you see here. So it was published in Swedish and in Northern Sami. So this is the Northern Sami edition. So here you can see my Elin Anna Labba. That's my Swedish name. And then it's got another name called Jon Augusto Elin Anna, and that's my Sami name, as we have our old name tradition and the Swedish name tradition. And we almost lost our Sami name tradition, but people have been tending to take them back. So more and more people, and young Sami people especially, use traditional names nowadays more. And I heard you speaking about a bit about place names, and it's been difficult to find places, as I have been using my Sami language a lot in this book, and it's been kind of a, like, almost a political statement. I think we will maybe get back to that, to use our names for the places that actually in many of these places were the first names, and then they have been changed to other names. So that are actually the old name of the places from where I come that I've been using. But I'm born and raised in Kiruna, as you said, and Kiruna is the northernmost, the city in the most north in Sweden. It's not a very big city, but big to be in the north. So I lived there, but my father is from Jokkmokk, a very, very small place, a bit further south, and I have been living there as well. And Jokkmokk is like 3,000 people in Jokkmokk. It's not big at all, but it's kind of the capital of the Samis on the Swedish side. And I say that I'm from the Swedish side of Sámi, and nowadays I live on the Norwegian side of Sápmi. So I have like Sápmi is like my homeland. So I don't use, well, I am Swedish in my passport, but identify myself as a Sami person. What else? We moved to Norway, or the Norwegian side, 2 years ago. Took our kids and our reindeer and the dogs and and came here. So I'm living now in Nordland in Norway. I don't know how familiar you are with Norway, but in the northern part of Norway. So but I still got my family, my mom and my dad and my brother in Sweden. And we are working. I'm working as I'm journalist, and now I'm working as an author, as a writer, full time. Actually, since I published this book, I got the opportunity to do that. But we are reindeer herders as well. So that's what my husband is doing, and that's still a kind of a family business. You have to do it, so like the whole family has to be engaged in reindeer herding. It's like having a farm, or you can't just say that I'm not to do this. So I'm doing that as well a bit, but mostly writing.
Well, that is a great, I think, starting point as we jump into questions. And I just want to let you guys know I have pages worth of questions here because this book brought up a lot for me, but I really want to hear your questions. So please put those into the chat, and we will be diving into those as you toss them out there. Can you just talk to me a little bit about what prompted your decision to begin gathering these stories and embark on writing a book?
Yeah, it's been a story that it hasn't been like hidden in that sense. I knew that we had been, like, my family had been displaced, and that we came like more further north than than Kiruna, actually. But I didn't know much more. I didn't know what year we came. I didn't know from what place. I had no like details of our history at all. It was this like um, very strange knowing that you're coming from a place, but you can't really tell from where, and you have never been there. But it's been like following me for in Sami people in Sámi people are very it's like this very keen knowing families and relatives are very, very important in the Sami culture. So when you meet older people, they all often ask you who you are and where you come from. They want to like tie you to the land and to the places. So when I was a kid, I learned to say that that this is my name, but we are from there, so that they could know what family I belong to. So I was like identifying myself that way since I was like a child, and that was very strange, identifying you to a place that you didn't know about. So I started to ask my mother and my dad and my aunts and my uncles and so on, and starting to like wanted to write a family story in the beginning, but my family wasn't that talkative, so I had to be continuing and going further and further and further. So I was like it was just like growing that way. and started to interview, as I'm a journalist, interview older Sami people, elder people.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that, how receptive they were at sharing their stories. Did it start at all with like you had some foundation pieces and then you wanted to ask more, or did it go into like, these are the people in my family that might have some stories
Yeah,
and
of
they
very
weren't
like,
willing to share as much or didn't have as much to share, and then you went from further out?
yeah, the people were saying you could go to that woman, she has a very good memory, or and she said that you can go to that man, he isn't that old, but he's been always listening to the people when people have been telling. So it just grew like that, and I started to drive into these small Sami villages with my car and finding people. And I was working for a long time, so it wasn't that I was like working full time. It was like I was 7 years, I think, interviewing, even though the book isn't that that thick. Yeah, and this was like a long time ago, a lot of people, there weren't many people still living that had memories. Actually, there was just a few of them that had been displaced, and they were just kids when they were like 5 years old or 6 years old. So they had like children memory of the happy those kinds of memories. So I went to archives and started to dig there, and I got interviews from other people. Like they had been like tape recording their families and their relatives, and I could like borrow those, and borrowing pictures and like getting. So it was like picking small pieces, like a very shattered history, and so that has been like affecting the book as well. That it was like so um, destroyed in a way, and so like having just like some small pieces of glass that you have to like try to put together in some kind of way. So it wasn't that kind of full story that you got, like you ask and then you get everything. I was like having to pick like here and there, and yeah.
Yeah, it sounded like you were pretty welcomed though, that you weren't, that people weren't pushing you kind of off, or going with like, oh, that's my child memory. It isn't something worth of the story to tell. Or were people pretty open? I
Yeah,
mean, tell me more
I
about that.
I was actually surprised. I thought it would be more difficult. But I think that, and I have been talking to other people saying that when the time is like, sometimes you need like the time to pass and generations to be like in between, that often it can be like easier for a grandchild to go back and then your mother and your father to talk with your grandparents, that you have like some kind of distance to the history. um and it's not that hurtful anymore. Even though it's still a trauma, it's not that close to you, and it can be like. So I think that was like the time and the distance, and that also there has been a big cultural change in Sweden, and it's not as shameful anymore, and all those kind of things that have been like pushing down the Sami culture and the Sami stories that you people have been hiding. There have been Sami people, and all those kind of things are changing. So I think that's like society as well has been changing a lot.
I love that it worked to get those stories and people were eager to share them and you were able to collect them. Are there any that didn't get into the book that you were really, you know, were antidotes or moments that you were like, these were really powerful, or just even just experience of receiving those stories that you would mind sharing with us?
Yeah, my first interview outside my family, that was I had been home with my son. And it was the first time I just left him. He was a kid by then. And then I went to Västerbotten, in a small place called Tärnaby, and an old woman called Ella. And she's actually the woman that gave the title, in the Swedish title and the Sami title to the book. And so I was staying at her place, and she was telling this story of how she had been left because she had a twin sister and they were two children, and her family couldn't bring both of the children when they were moving south, so they had to choose which one, and they chose to leave Ella, the woman that I was meeting, back in the north, and to go south with the other uh, child. And you could like see that she hadn't like ever like recovered from that they chose not to bring her, even though she was 90, and this happened when she was like 3. So she was yeah, I'm still like when I talk about it. And she said that it's in Sámi. It's called. He said Herrarna mean, and that's I've been translating that to Swedish, which is like the gentleman put us here, or the lords put us here, or the masters moved us here. About. So that's why the title got that, because that was my first interview and the most important one I ever did. Yeah.
As you're saying that, I'm wondering just how other family members reacted. Like your family, how did they react reading the book? How did those that had family members in the book, that have they reached out to you, said, "Oh my gosh, I never knew this story," or "Thank you," or is there some reaction that they're having out there about the book as more people are reading?
It's been beautiful reactions, and it has been like and it's been like popping up new stories, and new in a couple of weeks there will be a trip back to like we have these small Sami societies, not societies but like organizations, and they are like organizing trips to go back to their homeland, to their ancestral lands, like so, and they are like bringing the book and, and reading it when they come up there, and so it has those kind of like very, very beautiful. It has like been like when you tell a story, you have like being you're like making preparing the ground for new stories to come up in a sort of way that you sometimes need one story to, because there are a lot of many other stories, but in a silence you're like still like just keeping them inside of you. So it has kind of that kind of effect that people have been starting to tell about their um, relatives, and oh, I remember this one, and maybe the thing that people have been saying, that you sometimes think you have to have some kind of full history to have a history. But people are like sometimes being like comforted by that, even though I have just this small piece that is a very important piece. So yeah, that is wonderful. I didn't it has been very it still has been, it's been like very, I think the most important things I will ever do as a journalist, or I have ever done, and it has like changed me in so many ways. So I think even though I'm still writing, it's like difficult to compare it, because it's like so close to my heart is my family history, and it's like I got close to a lot of the people that I was interviewing as well during the years.
Well, how wonderful. I think of that, maybe more people were more motivated to tell their story or give value to that too. Like that sort of important. So I can share mine, or I'll tell my piece of it, even if it's a small nugget. We were talking about that translation piece of it. How does it feel to witness your book translated into multiple languages, each communicating your story? Does it seem like it does it differently at all with the translations? There's a lot of them out there now.
I realized that I did it very complicated, as I did it's not an easy job for the translators, as it has so much Sami in it, and it's like even though the translators are really skilled in Swedish language, it's still like very challenging for them to translate it as they're. So I have been working a lot with like explaining what that's mean, that's that word, and that's that word, and so on. As I've been kind of hardcore in my book, that I didn't want to translate the Sami language. I did want it to be like as people were talking. Yes, I wanted to be like so close to the reality as it could be. So I wanted to, and people have, as we have a language that I guess it's the same for a lot of indigenous people, and in US and Canada as well. We have lost our languages a lot, and most of Sami people speak Swedish or Norwegian or Finnish, the majority language, and we don't have the Sami language. So Sami people have this way of speaking Swedish and putting in Sami words in it, like using the words that you have. So I wanted to like reflect that, and that the text would like be like how it was when I was listening to it, and so on. So I think it hasn't been easy, but actually I think this book, the Roxwell Echo So, is the most close to the indigenous experience, as the publisher had so much experience from other indigenous stories and could like understand it in a way that no other could. So I was very lucky with that's kind of like coming home in a sense. Even though I have never been to Minnesota, I still felt that they could like understand me completely. So that was really nice.
Oh, I love that. And especially because you were just speaking before about how the gentleman put us here, like the monster put us here, that like that language difference can really impact how people take those words and think about what you're writing and what
Yeah,
they're reading. So just that the slight one word difference, if somebody really understands it while they're translating it, they can have much better understanding of the word choice or tone.
yeah.
Um,
And
oh, go ahead.
yeah. No, and we were talking about the title, and the rocks will echo our sorrow, that they would um that was like a really important part of the text, that people was like thanking the land when they were leaving, and thanking the stones and the trees and the water and the boats and everything. I heard those stories so many times that you were like, they were knowing that they wouldn't come back, and it was that this would be the last time they would ever see this land. So they were like thanking, as you do in Sami tradition. You thank when you come and you greet, and you have that kind of connection. And in Minnesota University Press could like pick that up immediately and see that that could have some kind of resonance in an experience in that you have. So that was yeah. Mm.
Yeah, I was noticing that even the covers are different. That the one that we have has uh, a young person, right, that
Yeah.
is on the cover, and the one that I was looking at before, the gentleman has an older
Yeah.
person. And I thought that's such an interesting, even the translation, like how you respond emotionally when you see the difference in the pictures. And
Yeah.
I love that there was pictures within the book. That was so helpful too in that connection piece. But I wondered, did you get to have say, or was that somebody else deciding that?
Um, Not that much say. I had like some different kind of examples. You do like that or this one or so. Um, but it's also difficult because it's another country, and it can be like other tastes and other things that are like and it's difficult for me to say as well that no, I don't like that. You should be doing this, because there could be like there are like cultural differences in books and in like literature. So I have been like trusting them a lot, and yeah.
Well, both pictures, I hope that people take a peek if you get a chance and look at them both, because I think they both hold a lot in them.
Mm.
And we definitely have deeper questions I want to dig into, but I'm wondering if there's going to be an audible or audio version of this at any point. I thought one of the
I don't.
things we found on other books is that it's really nice to hear the language authentically versus the interpretation that we do in our own minds sometimes. Any possibility?
In English. I don't know actually. Yeah, I can't answer that. I have to ask them. So I have
If we
no idea.
buy enough, maybe, right? We're starting to get some questions in the chat, so I'll get to those in a second. So please know that they're not being ignored if I don't read those next. But I'm going to just dig into this part about how does your background as a journalist influence what you're selecting for subjects and what you're writing. I love your working of the memoirs mixed with the poems, mixed with the beautiful photography. Tell us a little bit about that.
Um, yeah, my as I'm a journalist, so I've been interviewing is like my main way of working, and I like that a lot. I like doing interviews a lot, so I still do that, even though I have been writing a novel. My second book is a novel, but I have still been interviewing to get that book. But I found when I was talking to the they had a the people I was talking to, a very poetical language, and that my like journalistic language that I had been using for writing in newspapers and being on radio didn't like fit the stories that I got from the Sami people. And they had this kind of using this like pictures and tying the land to them then when they were talking, and they were like using. So I had been trying um to be close to their language when in this sense as well. So that made me write a very much more poetical in style that I have ever did, and I'm still doing that. So it's like changed my my way of writing. Actually listening to them and trying to just be as as close to their Sami language, and that's even though I have been writing this book in Swedish, I have been trying to put my Swedish language, my Swedish close to my Sami language. So I've been trying to like get those as close as I could. So for a Swedish reader as well, it can be a bit like strange in some ways, that it's not like Swedish like this classical Swedish. It's like very influenced by the Sami language in Swedish. Yeah, so but it was very nice that I had these archives where the how do you say, the lords, or the masters and they're like they're very like harsh language, and to put that beside the Sami story that is much more like everyday language in a sense, and poetic in at the same time. So it was like very useful that you could like put that. So it was really so big contrast between how the Swedish people were talking about them and how they were like telling their story. So
We have somebody that asked a question in chat. I'm going to ask if they are willing to read it. If they are, that'd be great. Give me a second. Okay, it doesn't look like they are, so I'm going to read it. You included so many poems of Sami poets. Poetry is much more visual than prose. Was the visual presentation of poems by Janan Turi, Holslusa, I'm going to get these names all wrong, Igna, decided by the publisher? To me, the visual as well as the text seem to communicate the idea of longing for a particular landscape.
yeah, I haven't actually. You have seen the book in English, and I haven't, because it hasn't reached Norway yet. So I haven't seen it, but I guess it's the same as in the original book, because the poems are like being put on pictures. Are they in your book?
Yes, they are. Yeah, we
Yeah.
actually thought that. I said, I wonder if she's even got it yet. It's barely up here.
Yeah, but I've been choosing pictures that they were like very sad landscape pictures, and very like so, and that that was also a very a way when you don't have the Sami people has been a very photographer, but a lot of photos, a lot of like anthropologists and race biologists for even coming and taking photos of Sami people. So there are like these big photo archives, and a lot of photos that aren't that nice, and other photos. So I tried to choose photos that were like as documentary as I could. My kids are playing here. If you hear my, it's like um and photos from before they were moved and after they were moved, and then and the poets that or the authors that was named, they've been like very important for my writing. They're like the biggest Sami authors that we have. Some of them, or a few of them, and so I have been reading them. They have been writing a bit. I had this idea of having some kind of collective story, writing a story that wasn't just mine. It wasn't like my voice that was important. That you have a lot of writers that have been saying things, and a lot of people that have been saying things. So you got this kind of, you said it in the beginning, this kind of kör in Swedish. How do you say that?
Chorus, yeah.
Choir.
Choir or chorus, yeah.
Yeah. So that you had this kind of as people like raising up and telling together a story that is like difficult to tell, and I think that is also a thing that has been very important, because that had made it easier for people to tell the stories, that they weren't like alone doing it, that there were a lot of people doing it at the same time, so you were like standing in together in some kind of way. And that had made it more like easier for people to tell afterwards as well, because they're like just filling in, like putting their voice to this bigger community. So it's been this wasn't answering the question at all. Was going away from
You're
it.
doing good. I love it. It's great.
But yeah, the pictures have been very important, and as the stories were so short and so like and scattered. The pictures could like fill in and fill up and like add things and like mm, yeah, help the silence in some kind of way.
I think it gives it a sense of place too. And one of the things I recognize is that, and that's not even right off my notes, but that it's more modern than I, in my head, somewhat imagined that this is a more modern time. And so seeing pictures and hearing about specific details that give it more of a sense of place in a more modern time. It's not hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And
No,
so some of those things do help you take you to the right era,
yeah,
right time frame.
They do. I want to add something there, Kelsey. Elin, as I was saying before, at the back of the book, you might not know this because you haven't seen the book, they have the photo captions. So the
yeah,
books within it do not, or the photos within the book do not have captions on them. And so you don't necessarily know who the people are. But for those of you that haven't read it or are going to read in the future, you can find that information in the back.
Karen would say the cheat is to check out the back. It has a bunch of resources that you might not know if you are a rule follower and start from the front and work your way back. There is definitely a variety of resources. There's translations. There's just a bunch of things that you might find helpful if you haven't checked that out yet. And that kind of takes me to the next thing. As we look at the history of it, what is kind of the prevailing understanding of history among those residing in the region now? I mean, have the stories, the historical events been taught in schools either in the past or currently?
no, no, it hasn't. Sami history has been like very very silent in all the countries. Um, and you could say today that Norway is like doing best if you are to like be putting grades. that it has been like happening a lot of things in Norway, and it's like they have been working more with some history and some culture and like putting that into school and so on. Sweden and Finland hasn't been that. It hasn't got that big. It hasn't happened that much, but I think it is happening now. It is changing now, actually. And Russia is Russia, so it's in every sense, it's like harder to be a Sami person in Russia, and has always been.
During your lifetime, do you feel like it's more common knowledge, or is it still like something people are going, I didn't know anything about that, or that those
Yeah,
people
that's
don't
the
exist
most
anymore, something?
that is the most common question I got. That people are like being a bit of ashamed, Swedish people, that they didn't know and that they haven't been like, and always say that we haven't learned anything about Sami people in the school. So they're like acknowledging that. And that's the fact. You haven't. Maybe you learned like the Sami people they are living in 4 countries and they have their languages and they have reindeer. Very, very like superficial knowledge about the Sami people. So, but there are coming a lot of books and films and theaters and on the cultural side happening a lot in all these Sami countries except Russia. So most in Norway, but in Sweden a lot. So it's changing. It is finally.
Yeah, I think that's a part of, like, you might see someone and say, I recognize this, but not realize that there was this deeper history, or there's so many layers to the history. I mean, I think even what we're talking about now is just a brief period of time. It's not the whole story, even in its own right. And this one is one I said it initially when I was talking to you that there might be some questions I'd ask. They're sort of opinions that you may or may not feel like you're comfortable talking about. But do you believe potentially that the removal policies implemented by the Swedish and Norwegian governments might have been influenced by the US government's efforts to displace Indigenous people here in the US? That was one we talked about a lot during our book group.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think so, because you can see these kind of things so like globally, widely, not just in the US and in the Scandinavian countries. And it's almost scary when you start looking at like boarding schools or assimilation policies and those that it's been like over the world, almost sometimes like the same year starting like in so many different countries that it's like some kind of like weird synchronicity that is really like yeah. And so it could have been that way, as we have, for example, I've been writing about, we were talking before, I've been writing about water and dams, these big dams, in this, because I come from a village that have been drowned in this big hydropower exploitation. And in that sense, I know that they were like looking at big dams in the US and like, oh, this is how we should do it in Sweden. So, but in this sense, I don't know. I honestly don't know, but I think it's like been it's the same like racist colonialism politics in the bottom of everything, and in that state of mind, you're looking at people and seeing people that are like minor to yourself, and as they are, you can just move them because they don't have the same rights that you do. So I think that is some kind of unfortunately a very very human and big a part of the dark part of our humanity. I just have to tell my kids that they shouldn't be like disturbing me.
They're not very loud, actually. You're doing okay. It's kind of delightful to hear children in the background. I look out your window and I see the light and I think, oh, it's still, it's getting darker around here, but we still have light. It's 7 o'clock your time right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 8 soon. Yeah.
Oh, still beautiful out. We all love that extra light this time of year. As we kind of are talking about the historical trauma and pieces of that, do you see that manifesting in the culture at all, the historical trauma in individuals, families, communities, as you had those conversations with individuals, but also just in your everyday life living in that region?
Yeah, and I think that when I started to write, I was like looking for like losing a place or losing a homeland. That was like my main. I wanted to understand that more. I think I hadn't like understood how much it had been like affecting the language and our music and the stories, and it has had like taking the roots from so many things that like there was like this so many things that was like they were like destroyed by the displacements, and that so many things that were lost and that people left and didn't bring when they so a big part of the like being indigenous people and indigenous person was left in the north, and they didn't bring that when they went south. And that you can see still that in these families that I have been, that you speak Swedish and you speak Norwegian, and you don't have your Sami music, and sometimes you don't have your clothing, and that you have been like removed from your culture in many ways. And that is a big trauma for people, of course. And language loss, I think, mostly. That is the most how to say, the biggest thing you can do for yourself is to take your language back. And one of the biggest losses you have is to lose your language. So that has been affecting some people a lot.
I think there's so many dialects too. So it's, I was reading about regions and the numbers of people in certain dialects of it. That's an interesting component. It's not just all uniform either.
I don't know.
Which changes up that experience. And this one is another one that you might not have the answers to, but maybe would feel in your gut. What strategies can we be employed to hold institutions accountable for their roles in forced removal and colonization, as well as the perpetration of systematic oppression? These are things that like we should be doing, things that we can do in general as individuals to enact positive change, armed with the knowledge that we have after reading the book or after our better understanding of history. I always love that phrase of do better once you know better, right? Is there anything that you would say that we should be thinking to do to hold people accountable or do things better ourselves?
But I am as a Sami, I think the most hurtful thing being an indigenous person in Sweden is the ignorance of the states. And I think that is the same for indigenous people all around the world, that you just feel so alone in so many senses, that you're living in the same city, in the same village, but you often feel very lonely because you're not sharing experiences or history. So I think that being like making it a part of a bigger society, not just being a minority issue or an indigenous issue, but making it like a part of um, like this, like forced displacement, but the displacements being a part of Swedish history and a part of something that is like the bigger Swedish picture as well. Not often in Sweden, it's just this. I mean, this is the Sami history, and it's not like it's not ours. It's that is yours. So you have this being dividing it. And even being interested by it and like reading it and taking part, but not really like engaging in it in some kind of way. So I think that is, I guess that is common around the world, that sometimes it creates some kind of being lonely on at the place where you live. That you're not like a part of your the outer world somehow. And that can be a lot of young Sami people like not doing that well, like I would say that. Well, not feeling well. I can't, yeah. So I think that is kind of you have this. I think that loneliness feeling is like kind of yeah, that can be dangerous for people.
That makes me think of those that maybe live in the United States that have Sami relatives or history or affiliation. Is there any sort of recommendations for those people that are trying to find that reconnect? Like any first steps you would recommend after your experience, kind of reaching out and reconnecting?
Going to the places, even though it will be far, that has been really, really important for me. So going back and you can. I think the most beautiful thing that I realized is that you can lose places, but you can in some way also regain them. You can like maybe not be a home at a place as you used to be, but you can get closer and like fill up yourself in a kind of way by going back to the homelands or go visiting them and land in Sami context is so like important. It's so like tied to who you are. So for me, that has been. I have been going to this place where my grandfather lived for many times. First time like feeling very, very lonely and like very like sad and hoping that I would feel more but didn't. But then like gradually like becoming more and more home and feeling more and more like less alien in that place. And that was really beautiful to see that you can do that. That is possible. You don't have to be like that. That's such a stranger for your life.
Is there any ideas about sentiments or experiences concerning the tourism centered around individuals interested in their Sami history? Like best ways to be respectful when you go back, if you're going back, or I mean, we saw mentions of the tourism as being an industry, but it's, how is that done in a way that is supportive of indigenous people, not disrespectful?
Yeah, but I think learning that is always like wherever you go, learn about the culture and the language and learn as much as you can. Then that will like then you won't do the mistakes and maybe not like put on the Sami clothing the first thing you do. That is like a kind of holy thing for people, like having your clothing and having the clothing from your family. And so that would like harm people if people would come and just put on the Sami dresses and use them as like a costume. And I think that is the same like for indigenous people all over the world, that you something that is like so important for you is like used as it's like been treated very like lightly by other people. Yeah.
Well, I have still more questions on my list, but I'm seeing some in the chat, so I'm going to read some off. Somebody says, I've met only a few people of Sami ancestry, so I wonder if you know if the forced displacements caused a worldwide dysphoria of Sami.
There is I don't know, worldwide maybe the The Sami people, this is really, really small people. It wasn't that small because people have been like ashamed of being Sami and have been hiding. And a lot of people in the north are actually Sami people, but they maybe don't even know that they are, because in so many generations you haven't been talking about it. And so I think there are a lot of people being Sami, not knowing that they are Sami, and I'm sure they went to Minnesota and or to to France and to I don't know where. So there are, I'm certain that there are people close to you being Sami, maybe not even knowing that they are, but maybe not that many, as Sweden isn't a big, or the Scandinavian countries aren't like, yeah, it's not China or India, so it's not a very, very big diaspora in that sense. But a lot of people have been like going away from the Sami culture, closing that door and never have been looking back. And people are like starting to open it now in Sweden and starting to like go back.
Well, and that's sort of the whole purpose of boarding schools and other techniques, right? To disperse and to dissolve sort of that connection. And so I can totally see how that has impacted a lot of what we might even know of people or what they're willing to share. Another question that came up is, during our book discussion, we've reflected on your question on whether people have the right to mourn for a place that has never been their own. How do you share with your own children and community your sadness, but also your joy in finding more understanding?
Yeah, I've been doing this together with my family a lot. So I've been to the place that I mentioned, that was my grandfather's place. Where I've been there with my parents and with my kids. They have been having this never going on a plane south to some warm island. They have always been going north to some Norwegian peninsula, looking for tracks that are not there, or like things that are lost. So they have been like a big part of this story. But then I think, often you don't speak with your children. You think they're like, you're just doing things. So I have found out that I have been like talking more to my cousins' children than I have actually been doing to my own. So that was interesting to realize, talking about that you're not like telling, why aren't you telling your story to your kids? I've been like asking the elders when I was, why haven't you been talking? And then you find yourself not always talking to your children because you're like doing homework and doing so many other things.
Or it could be like me. My husband says, I didn't tell him, but I told my mom, I told my kid, I told everybody else, right? So that you're telling your cousins, you're telling everybody, you're just not telling the children in this case. Kind of thinking about this sort of literary side. I know that you used to work for the Cultural Literature Center. Is there thoughts about how storytelling or literature can kind of enrich us as we move forward through our better understanding of Sami culture, history, stories? And what that work maybe was doing, or what you value of that?
Yeah, we are working a lot with like oral traditions. As the Sami, we have lost our languages. That's why we don't have like a really, really strong. You can't go to a library and find like this big bookshelves with Sami books, because people can't even write in Sami language. So it's been like affecting the stories as well. But so when you work with Sami literature, we are like working a lot with storytelling and helping people to tell stories and to write stories and tape stories and like and working against the clock. I read something when it was during the COVID, the pandemic, the people I think it was in some indigenous societies in Canada or in the US, that people were so stressed because there was so many people and they were so like carrying so much of your history and not passing away. And we had the same stress in Sápmi, that a lot of the people, they were like the history, like they have all our history, and as we don't have any books, so it's like very, very it's a very big loss when a older person in Sápmi dies, because it's not just a person, it's like everything you could know about that thing that is like in that person. So when we work with Sami literature, it's like a lot now about like documenting the history before it's gone, like writing about the boarding schools before the last person having those experiences are gone, writing about the race biology before they are like, because now people are started to talk. So there's a lot of like, you have this like clock ticking all the time. But we also have this joik tradition, and you have in the book there are some joiks, and that is like the first Sami poetry. It's like a poetical tradition that is almost like was killed in many areas and hasn't been like a lot of Sami people there, they have no like natural connection to joik. But in the northernmost region in Norway, there are like areas where people joik a lot. So we work with that as well. We try to like teach kids and children to joik, and getting people to like to try it, and like get into like some kind of use getting back to our literature like, expressions. There are not always the same as the Western. They can be like really, really different. So we're like decolonizing literature a lot. That's like our main focus.
So I often talk with our authors about how we can best support you and other authors. And so if you have any suggestions, like somebody said, make sure you're putting good reviews onto all the places, because those can create sales or can create more readership. What can we be doing to amplify your voice or amplify your books?
I think the best, the most beautiful thing about being a writer is this kind of like events that you have to like meet people, even though we're not like meeting, but you have some kind of, because it's a very like lonely thing to do. Writing, interviewing is very nice, but just the writing is like you're being a lot very lonely. So this is like the most beautiful thing, creating these kinds of events. I think most writers would say that, because that I myself I like that so much. And having like reading books together. People do that a lot in Sweden as well, having these book circles and reading a lot together and talking about books. And I think that's just amazing that we have this discussion in Sweden about the cultural death, that like people are reading less and less and like TikToking more and more and more. But I think still there are like a lot of people reading. So yeah, I don't know if that was an answer.
No, that's great. Well, we're kind of coming to the end. So I want you, if you are with us today and you have a question, please put those into the chat. And kind of as we're ending today, Elin Anna, I would love for you to tell us about your next book, the one that you just came out that we don't have access to, but we might be able to encourage publishers in the future to give us. And then also, if you have a second to maybe, if you feel comfortable reading just a short piece, that'd be lovely too.
Yeah, this is the Sámi edition of my novel, and that is I don't think how would you say that in English? Don't go to the sea, maybe.
Yep, I'll put it into the chat so they can see it.
Yeah. So it's far into the havet in Swedish, and the sea is not a sea. It's a lake that in my village where I have been grown up, it's called the sea because it got so big, as it was these big dams like holding the lake. So in the book, there are three like perspectives: a mother, and the daughter, and the lake, telling the story. So they're like the three of them, and how they are like being affected by the lake just becoming this monster and not being the familiar lake that it used to be. So that's like the main story, and how it starts in the 40s. So it's like the time after the displacements. The real story is that my family was displaced from the north to this big hydropower dam complex. So the elder in my village say that we were like removed to the most beautiful and the worst place in the world. They often say that it was just the both. It was both. It was very, very beautiful, and it was very, very difficult, but actually because they continued to move. In the 1970s was the last time there was like, how do you say that? Raising the lake. That was like the last. Then they built the biggest dam. So they were like moving like 4 times after the forced displacements, like still moving. So when I was talking about them and asking them back home about the 20s, they always talked about the lake, because that was like the first thing that came up when they were talking about like removing people. They were like, have been moving away from the lake for like decades. So I got a lot of those stories, and I did this novel after. So I started to writing that after when I was finished, because that was like a story about losing home as well, but another kind of story.
I thought our community surrounded right by Lake Superior would find that to be very valuable.
Yeah, I have actually been reading, and this as is a novel. I have been free here, so I have been reading a lot of other indigenous. I have been looking into New Zealand and to this where they have this river with its own rights. I don't know if you heard about Wanganui River. It has its all legal rights. So that's been like influencing me, because we have this like the water is like a living being in Sami culture. So I have been reading a lot about indigenous perspectives on water in the US and Canada, as it's like the same, and water being like a female power and those kind of, so that's why there are just women in the book almost. So I have been really, really inspired by other indigenous and helped by my publisher in Minnesota, as they could have been like, oh, we can read this and you can have a look at this book, and so it's yeah, I think it's maybe a bit close to your
Yeah, actually, even your previous book you wrote, for us, I think many of us had read The Walking Mill Road by Stacey Juilliard, and had familiarity, as she had collected stories from in this region, and was telling stories that people hadn't heard before too, of the experience and the changes of the community and things. As we're getting to it, if you really are wanting to unmute and ask a question, this is your time. Otherwise, I'm going to invite Elin Anna to read for a second for us.
I just have one thing to say. Elin Anna, when everyone in our office was reading your book, you could hear yoking, is that joke, coming from everyone's office as we put it into YouTube, and then heard it coming from everywhere. So it was fun to have that experience.
Oh, it's really nice. It's a very, very special musical tradition, and it's unique. There's nothing like yoik. It's like the only music tradition that you put like you're not singing about someone. You're just being that person when you're just going into some kind of, yeah. It's very. I'm so glad that it's like having its revival in Sápmi. The people are actually starting to yoik again. Yeah, I read in Sami, in my Northern Sami, which is my Sami language. Puures ätnähat. Sorry. Palkis manna goike jeki rasta, lahpu ilmavas, manna njäärebes vuodai. Soogis ade ruankasin, palkis liboris, koru toudadan. Mun erranan palkas ja tuolen rabas päikai tas oudulis. Tulmun se muli, pierran muorekan suahkemäältä kipatsel. Tiedän ahte eenaan vältä ruhtuluotta, ahte taan me hodjan, illa sa hoinu. Vahtsan kuahte satsai. Vuostas le juur dievanalde, kos le värtus puulus merra kuului. Le no puolis, että se ärran pähtsän. Tehdä kuhkis räässiä, ma te kärki tatna sivulde. Den ejain, le tipma leunirega. Lendas leemas ouduel ja tiedä kosukalkan. Vatsan tuolos karttichara ja äätsäkä miedel. Masle ein Tjállegoahte. Enle agenis leemas pähkis, mille Sámi jaska tegodaat. I kullu piekka, vaikka tiedänä piekka. Le aega kuurille se tjääkku ja maana viegari se tappe. Le aega kun Suomis johkai olkun ja niskui tagai tuolla äärani, sluuhki pastelis kaamasuini. Vuorrassa le muitelan, kun sin tärvähet se etnämä kun puhti tiehke. Käisi orronsa ja pälkäi, mut monin tuosta. Kosa mon tuonain kuuluan. Millä muuruokkitua. Län saagasana pidä jätä siirtylätsä maanekuin. Makal koului ja oosi jätämme orra tjeron ja päihkiin. Sähti miin oomastallat.
Oh, really beautiful. Thank you so much for that. You know, it's just so wonderful to listen to you and hear from you and learn from you. Thank you so much for the time you gave to us today. Thank you for all of you for joining us today. This is not the last time we are going to hear about Elin Anna, I'm sure. And I've already seen that there's other people signing up to do interviews with you other places. So if you missed out on asking your question, I think look for other things by Minnesota Press that you'll be part of in the future. So there'll be more opportunities to learn. If there are questions you desperately wanted to ask, this is the last second or two to ask that. Otherwise, I want to say thank you to everybody for coming. I wish you a good afternoon, and Elin, and a lovely evening, because you are going to have to go tuck those kids in at some point, right?
Yeah.
Anybody?
Waving outside here. I was like,
Yeah.
trying to ignore them.
It was so beautiful to hear you speak and also to read the book. I'm just so grateful for this opportunity and so glad it aligned.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Kiitos, you say in Sámi.
And the book is out, you guys. So this is a great book to give as a gift to people and continue those conversations. When you gift it on, then other people can continue reading it, and you can have more people to discuss it with, right? I know that Drury Lane is still getting more in, and that I just saw my Kindle wasn't going to get it out until the end of May, but that I think other producers were going to be sooner than that. So I encourage you to pick it up and pass it on and give your reviews.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Elin Anna. Have a good night.